Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies. Well, if you had a pocket full of the posies that we're going to be making today, you'd have very sticky pockets. Because we're going to be making apple posies today. As I look through these vintage recipes, it seems like there's kind of three different categories that our cookbooks fall into. The first being professional cooks or chefs, and then there are the books that are put out by churches and community groups that are individual submissions by people in that church or the community or whatever it is. And then the third category tends to be advertising cookbooks, and these tend to be shorter little pamphlets that are put out by baking powder companies or flour companies, or in today's case, a margarine company, as we're going to be doing a recipe from the Good Luck Margarine Company. This recipe's booklet from the Jelke Good Luck Margarine Company, published in 1927, is where we get our recipe for today. In a lot of these older recipes, we also see that there are modifications or alterations that can be made to some of these, and that is the case with today's recipe as well. Because for the recipe for apple posies, it actually says to make the recipe that's found earlier in the book for baking powder biscuits and to simply add sugar and then the filling that you're going to see that we're going to make for these. So this is going to be basically a biscuit that is wrapped around an apple and cinnamon sugar filling. The first thing that we're going to do is to sift our dry ingredients. And in a lot of these old recipes, they tell you to sift your dry ingredients, but I'm not sure if you know why. Sometimes it is for texture. They want the flour to get aerated, they want it to get nice and fluffy, if you're doing a cake or something, for instance. However, a lot of the times in these old recipes, they will actually have you sift the ingredients because weevils were a big problem in the dry pantries of times gone past, and even sometimes still today. So to send it through the sifter or through some sort of sieve would be to simply sort out those bugs from your good ingredients.
Sift 2 cups of flour with 4 teaspoons of baking powder, a half teaspoon of salt, and 2 tablespoons of white sugar. The recipe then calls to cut in 4 tablespoons of margarine, as this is from a margarine cookbook. However, I'm not a big fan of margarine, so I actually used butter here. But you're going to cut that in until you get kind of a mealy look, and then you're going to add 3/4 of a cup of milk and simply stir that until you have a soft dough. Once your dough is complete, we can move on to the apples, which we are going to dice finely. I actually used about 3 apples here, but it was very thick with the apple filling, so you probably could get away with maybe 2 to 3 apples here. To roll out the dough, dust the top with some flour as well as on your countertop, and then you're going to alternate directions with your rolling pin until you get about 1/4 inch thick. Take your prepared diced apples and spread those evenly over the dough that you've just rolled out. Don't do it too thick though, because it's going to be hard to roll otherwise.
I've stirred up some cinnamon sugar, and we're just going to sprinkle that over our apples that we have here, and then all we have to do after that is simply just roll it up like you would a cinnamon roll.
Prepare a greased 9x12 baking pan. Starting at one edge, roll your dough so that you end up with a spiral, much like either a jelly roll or like you would if you were making cinnamon rolls. This dough is actually pretty forgiving, but be gentle with it anyway so that you don't tear your dough. Cut your excess dough off the ends, and then in 1-inch increments you're going to do slices and then place them with the cut side up, so that you end up with the spiral as you're looking at it from the top. This recipe makes 12 apple posy rolls.
The recipe says we're going to put these in a 350-degree oven for about 15 minutes. So here's the test. I've got one out of the oven, and I gotta be honest, they don't look a whole lot different than they looked when they went in the oven, except for the fact that there is a little bit of golden on the bottom. And as usual, the time lies in these recipes because it definitely needed more than 15 minutes. I ended up having these in here for close to half an hour, and they still didn't gain much color on top. However, I do believe that they're fully cooked. I have cut one out of the pan, and let's see. It's actually a little different than I expected it to be. It is a biscuit, but it's light and fluffy. It's not a hard biscuit like I thought it would be. And the apples have softened a little bit, but they still have a little bit of a bite to them. The cinnamon is definitely there, but it's not overwhelming. And it's not overly sweet either, because there's not a ton of sugar that went into the dough. There was only the 2 tablespoons of sugar in the dough. And then with the cinnamon sugar, it was not nearly as heavy as it would have been if we were making cinnamon rolls or something like that. So if you are not a person that enjoys really sweet things, this might be for you because it's sweet, but it's not overly sweet.
Our apple posies get a score of 38 points out of 50, with points off mostly because of the visual appeal. They look quite misshapen and not the neatest. However, the flavor is really good, the texture is really good. I would recommend these to make them, again, especially if you're doing like a brunch or something like that. On our ratings board, our apple posies come in at number 4 currently. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on social media to find out what we're cooking next on Recipe Reviver.